Give me big old buckets of butter beer. Give me big old barrels of butter beer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butter beer.
Welcome to the Three Broomsticks. We invite you to pull up a chair, grab a butterbeer, and settle in for a hearty discussion about Harry Potter. I'm Sophia Jenkins.
I'm Aurelia Lieb.
And I'm Irvin Cateman. And I'm so excited to introduce our guest today, Adam James. Hi, Adam.
Hello.
Hi, everyone.
So Adam emailed me a couple years back about my Dumbledore book and essentially became one of my Harry Potter correspondents. So when we needed a smarty pants person who knows all about Harry Potter for our podcast, I absolutely reached out to him. So Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
So, hi, everyone. My name is Adam James. I live in Pennsylvania. So it's freezing here right now, but I'm super excited to be on the podcast. I was really honored to be asked to be on such an early episode of Three Broomsticks podcast. Really, really exciting. My Hogwarts house, I'm a Gryffindor primary, and then I say there's a little Slytherin mixed in there too. But I've always kind of considered myself a Gryffindor, not just because, you know, when I read the books first, it was like Gryffindors are good, Slytherins are bad. But as time has gone on, I've sort of embraced the Slytherin aspects of my personality. But do you want me to go into my journey to Potter?
Yeah. Tell us how you've come to the fandom.
Awesome. So I started off reading them when I was just a kid, like 8 or 9 years old. And I, just really instantly loved it, kind of like how I felt like we all did. But I just reread the books a lot of times before Goblet of Fire was published. And then after I read Goblet
so you like came to it like early, like pre-movies and everything.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I remember being in like 4th or 5th grade, and we had like this like reading competition or we had to do like reading tests on the computer, and students who read the books could then create the test for other students. It was kind of a cool little thing, like an extra credit thing. And I right away was like, I did the first Harry Potter book and someone already made the test. So I real quick read the second and third one so that I could be the one to make the test for those. And yeah, I just really, really loved it from the moment I read it.
Now, my question is, do you still have those tests? Because I'm curious how well we would all do.
Probably not. I mean, they were probably pretty basic. I was like 9 years old or 10 years old, but I'm sure they were interesting to say the least. So after that, I mean, I just, I went to every one of the book releases at midnight and, the movie releases and all that stuff. And just, any way that I could immerse myself in like what I like to call the core Harry Potter stuff. But I read the books, just it seemed to be like over and over again. It was just like a comfort thing for me. I'd read them going to bed. I'd read them when I was on a plane, on long trips. Like whenever I had time or I was just sitting relaxing, I just want to read a Harry Potter book. And so I can confidently say that I've read the entire series, I'd say over 70 times at this point.
Holy
Wow. That is a lot of times.
That is so many times.
Yeah, when I went to college, my roommate was very surprised. He said, "Do you read that every night?" And I said, "Yeah, I do. I sit here and the last couple 15 to 20 minutes before bed, I pull out whatever book I'm on and I read it." And just recently, I've started taking breaks in between my rereads, to kind of like rediscover it. But I never let more than a month or two go by without picking up another book.
It suddenly makes sense why you are always emailing me like, so I was just reading this part of Harry Potter and had this thought. Because I'm like, it is either the slowest reread of all time or you're just rereading on a loop. So now I have my answer.
Yep, definitely on a loop. But obviously, like all of us, each time I go through it, I really just like finding those like little tidbits, the, little connections that you didn't realize the first 68 times you read through it. But what is kind of unique about me, I think, is that I, until recently, never really got into like the online fandom presence. Like I didn't read a lot of like the theories and I obviously was exposed to some of it, like is Snape good or bad? And, who is the Half-Blood Prince? Like all of those like big storylines, but like the intricacies I tried to avoid just because I really enjoyed the text and enjoyed that aspect of discovering it for myself. And so sometimes I will like, there's been times I've messaged you, Irvin, and said, "Hey, I was wondering this, or did you ever think this?" And you're like, oh, the fandom discussed that 10 years ago.
Right, and I'm like, let me take you on a history lesson back in 2006.
I mean, to be fair, Irvin is like the history lesson for all of things related to the Harry Potter fandom, because I, like you, Adam, found the fandom really late.
Yeah, me too.
So it's like every time something comes up, Irvin's like, oh, no, we've done that. I was like, oh, sorry.
Yeah, I've spent the better part of 20 years checking MuggleNet every day, so yes.
And I mean, honestly, like, aside from that, I just, I really enjoy reading the main text. I try not to read a lot of fan fiction. I feel like it messes with my head on, like, what's real and what's not. And obviously the movies already do enough of that. You get the movieisms and I think the worst one is the burning house
don't get us started.
Burning of the Bro. But yeah, other than that, I'm looking forward to just being able to read these with my daughter and any future kids I have one day. And yeah, that's my journey to and continuing on with Potter.
So Adam, I'm just gonna follow up a bit because I don't think I've ever talked to someone who's read the books that many times. So do you have entire long passages memorized word for word?
I've had different people say if I went to a page, could you tell me what's next? And yes, sort of, they'll say okay, they'll read a sentence and I'll be able to say okay, this is what's next, or this is the next word, or something like that. But I mean, there's a lot of pages and a lot of books, so obviously not every time.
Well, because speaking for myself, I've read the series maybe 16, 17 times, cover to cover. What about the rest of you guys?
I lost track when I was 12 or something, so I honestly don't know at this point. And I don't always read the whole series, I don't always do a whole series reread, so sometimes there are some books that I probably have read more than others, but I haven't done a very good job keeping track.
Yeah, I think just by the nature of things, of reading them as they were coming out, I've definitely read the first 4 more times than I've read 5, 6, and 7, just because there was a big gap and we were all like, what's going to happen? So you just reread the books. I would guess 30 plus times, somewhere there.
Okay, so apparently I've read these books the least of anyone here. So I guess y'all can school me on what happens.
I don't think we can, though.
Yeah, I think you've picked them apart in other ways more thoroughly than doing a full reread. But I am definitely way too, I don't know if you want to say obsessive compulsive or what, but once I start that first sentence of, Sorcerer's Stone or Philosopher's Stone, depending on which one I have in my hand, I feel like I have to get to the epilogue, and then I feel complete.
I mean, same. I only ever read the series, as a whole.
Really? Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting. Sometimes I'm just, in a Half-Blood Prince mood, and I just want to read Half-Blood Prince or something.
I mean, it's one huge story, so, yeah, it feels weird to, only read one part of a bigger story.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I, in the past, 5 years, made an effort to start with Goblet of Fire and do Goblet of Fire to Deathly Hallows, because those are the books I've read not as many times as the first 3, and I mean, that's where the more important stuff happens. So.
Yeah. So, Adam, what's your favorite book of the 7?
So, my favorite book is Half-Blood Prince, closely followed by Chamber of Secrets. It was very close between them for me, but Half-Blood Prince, I definitely think I enjoy reading the most.
Excellent. Love to hear it. And favorite character?
So, hot take alert, but my favorite character, or the character that I find most intriguing, is James Potter.
That is a hot take.
That's a very hot take. One shared by one of my close friends, Sam. Not our Sam, different Sam. So I apparently am friends with people who like James Potter a lot.
So, obviously it's an unpopular opinion, but I think James gets a lot of hate that isn't quite deserved. So I'm not defending any of the bullying or anything like that. He was definitely a jerk as a youngster. And, I think a lot of people have that experience where you do things you regret, or you say things you didn't mean, or try to do some all the things you see by the lake with James and Sirius and Snape, like those things that happen. But as he grows into adult, like this is where I kind of connect with him, like the growth that he shows. Like he obviously, like as a 18 to 20-year-old, he commits his life to fighting the dark arts, joins Dumbledore's army, like really commits to just raising a family at that age, and commits his life to keeping them safe, going into hiding. And like I said, I can just relate to that character growth and like that growing up. And I don't really think he gets enough credit for his magical ability either. Like, I mean, he was an animagus, and it sounds like he was sort of like the driving force between him and Sirius, but behind doing that and getting Peter to be able to do that as well. I mean, we know he was a skilled dueler and, a great Quidditch player, obviously had the loyalty of a Gryffindor. And I just think like one of the reasons that I'm so intrigued by him, and what I think like the biggest travesty, is that when Voldemort comes to, the house and James comes to the door and he doesn't have his wand. Like, I just wish he would have picked that wand up just to see what would have happened. I don't think he, would have matched Voldemort, but how long could he have dueled him? Like, what would it have been an epic duel? I just find that so interesting. And so maybe that's part of the reason why I consider him like such an interesting and one of my favorite characters.
I still think he should have transformed into a stag and just ran at Voldemort with his antlers.
That would have been great.
Yes, agreed.
I've never thought of that, but I do agree. That's my now headcanon that I'm going to go by.
I think that would have freaked Voldemort out. Voldemort would have been like, what is going on? Like, it just would have been funny to see the shock on Voldemort's face.
Yeah.
Well, welcome, Adam. It's so great to have you. And today, for episode number 2, we've gathered to discuss the 100th chapter of the Harry Potter series. 100, which is The Noble and Most Ancient House of Black, and that's chapter 6 in Order of the Phoenix. We would obviously encourage you to read the chapter before listening, but we're not your mom, so, you do you. Right, now that we've told you what this episode is about, let's jump into a quick chapter summary. Harry and all the children living in Grimmauld Place help Sirius and Molly tackle the extraordinary task of cleaning the house. Fred and George continue their business plans right under Molly's nose, while Sirius takes on his mother, Kreacher's foul language, and Molly's overbearing nature. All the while, Harry gets to learn some snackable drama about Sirius's family. It's fairly incestuous without being totally incestuous. Bella's a baddie, the sisters are nasty, and Draco is Harry's godfather's cousin's son's roommate from college. Yuck. Harry's having a good time with his real family, but there's still something lurking in the back of his mind, a certain discontent with the whole situation, and it's all to do with our favorite headmaster, Albus Dumbledore, who just won't talk to the kid.
So the reason that I really wanted to talk about this chapter specifically, the 100th chapter, is that it is the middle chapter of the entire series. The Harry Potter series is 199 chapters, and this is the 100th, so there's 99 on either side of it.
Symmetry.
Right? And I'm like, what can we glean from it? Like, looking at it sort of, not just like as another Order of the Phoenix chapter, but like as the midpoint of the series.
First of all, it's telling how long 5, 6, and 7 are, that the midpoint is early on in Order of the Phoenix.
True, yes.
Yeah.
Which, like, doesn't even get into pages, because, like, the Order of the Phoenix chapters are so long.
Which is why it's the best book.
I was shocked to learn that this was, like, the middle chapter in the series. I would have never suspected that when this episode was proposed.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, and, like, as a chapter, it's fairly unassuming, like, at first glance, but I feel like once I read it, like, with an eye to that, it does a lot of work in, like, widening the wizarding world for us. That was sort of the thing that struck me the most. It gets into purebloods and how they're all interrelated. It gets into, house elves and wizarding portraits and ministry politics and all this kind of stuff that I feel like shows you how wizards live. as a turning point, I feel like sort of before this chapter, Harry is kind of a stranger in the wizarding world. Like, less so as the books go by, but, like, you know, even in Goblet of Fire, like, there are lots of times when Harry's like, wait, what's a Death Eater? Like, who cares if Hagrid's a giant? And after this chapter, Harry is very much like a natural part of the wizarding world. Like, he no longer feels like such an outsider in this community.
This is also the second, like, wizarding home we do get to see as a reader as well. Because we've only seen the Weasleys' house. And obviously, just because they're much, much, much poorer than the Blacks, that's a completely different level of wealth in the house. And also, I think there's more colors in the Weasley house. I would just assume.
Yeah.
It's more homely.
Well, because, like, exploring the Burrow, like, you don't know how much of it is, like, it's the Weasley house versus, like, it's a wizarding home. So I feel like now that we have something to compare it to, now we sort of get a feel for that type of stuff. I
think it's a really cool comparison between the three wizarding homes we see. So we've talked about the Burrow, obviously, and now Grimmauld Place, but the only other one I think that we see is, or no, I guess there would be Luna's house, Shell Cottage, and the Malfoy Manor. But I was thinking particularly the Malfoy Manor, how it just seems to, like, contrast, like, there's, like, three levels of it, like the Weasley house being, like, the most, I would say magical, the House of Black being, like, somewhere in the middle, and then, like, Malfoy Manor almost seems to be the least magical of them all. And I know there's a lot of backstory with that, like, about how the Malfoys acquired their land and different things, but, like, the only thing of note that I can think of in the Malfoy Manor is their basement has, like, an anti-apparition charm, but other than that, there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of, like, wizarding components to the Malfoy house compared to the other two.
That's
That
true,
is interesting.
and I never thought of that.
I mean, the only other thing we do see with the Malfoy house is probably only added with Voldemort residing there, where, you know, you can only pass through the gates if you have the Dark Mark. I don't think that was always there.
No, probably not.
Yeah. I mean, we don't spend that much time in Malfoy Manor. Like, when you said a third wizarding house, the one that came to my mind is the Gaunt Shack. Because we do sort of pop in there. Is it just the one time? It feels like more than once.
Well, in two different memories, actually. The first one, and then when Tom Riddle goes back and gets that information from Morphin.
Right. And that one also isn't strictly magical. Like, I mean, there's a snake on the door. That's about all that's coming to mind.
Yeah. That is interesting that, like, some of the pureblood houses don't seem to be that into creating, like, elaborate magical elements to their houses. That's interesting. The Burrow feels a lot more magical.
Yeah, like you walk into the Burrow and it's like wizarding clock here and dishes doing themselves there. I think that might be a movieism, but you know, it's just like a lot of different things happening that seem magical, and like within like the like Grimmauld Place, you know, there's like the fact that it's under the Fidelius charm and that it had all these spells put on by Sirius's father, and like you just like you know, there's all these artifacts,
and then you walk in and you're greeted by Mrs. Black.
Yeah, portraits on portraits on portraits, and so yeah, absolutely.
I think part of the like what makes the Burrow seem more magical is also that it was extended sort of with every child, so it doesn't look like a normal house. So whereas it's like the Black House is just a regular townhouse in London that was, you know, has now added magical like features, but on like the basis of it is a normal townhouse.
Mm-hmm. And there are different feelings to the magic. Like the Burrow is supposed to be kind of like a very exciting, homey feeling for Harry, where he's like feeling like he's entering this world and being welcomed into it. Whereas the Black House, the magic seems to be like fighting against everyone who's in the house, at least when the Order is there. And I think that's kind of a funny, it's sort of a flip on how Harry experiences the magic of these two different houses.
Yeah.
So it's also another way that this chapter sets a lot of stuff up for the later books. And, you know, we do spend another significant chunk of time back in Criminal Place in Deathly Hallows, when it is their refuge while they're planning on how to break into the Ministry.
When they come back, we don't really see as much of the house fighting against them, I feel like. Or at least, especially once they get Kreacher on their side. Then the house just feels like a welcoming, sort of friendly place.
Yeah, it's interesting because to me, it sort of makes it feel like these houses almost take on a lot of the magic of, like, the people who reside in them, right?
Yeah.
Because I think there's a line, like, much later on in this chapter that I'm trying to find in our notes right now. Okay, no, I don't have it. But basically, like, Harry says at some point in this chapter that it feels like the Order is declaring war on the house when they're, you know, quote unquote cleaning it, and that the house is putting up a good fight, like aided and abetted by Kreacher. And yeah, I feel like a lot of the, like, really powerfully magical dwellings in the Wizarding World, I mean, don't take on ascensions per se, but, like, do sort of develop a bit of personality almost. Like, absorbing just the magic and the intentions of the wizards who live there. Like, you know, I'm thinking Hogwarts and the way that Hogwarts seems to be so loyal to Dumbledore and so hostile to Umbridge. And, you know, this house has had centuries of, you know, bigoted purebloods of, you know, questionable mental stability living there, and it certainly seems to have had an effect on its magic.
Yeah, I like that idea.
But Sophia, you had a lot of really good points about, like, this chapter as the midpoint of the series.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, first I'm curious, do you all think that Rowling planned this as the midpoint of the series? That would take, like, a lot of planning in advance, but the fact that it's, like, the 100th chapter does sort of feel like it was planned.
I'm going to say no, because and I'm gonna back that up. I do actually have backup for that. Because I'm thinking of the Order of the Phoenix outline, right? That we saw in Journey Through a History of Magic. And basically, listeners, if you don't know, there was an exhibit at the British Library that then, like, moved to New York, which showed a lot of, like, Joe's notes and stuff, along with a lot of the actual, like, historical artifacts that inspired the magic. And so they released books of these exhibitions that are, I think, some of the most valuable for a Potter collector, just in terms of seeing, like, how the series was created. But one of the things that we saw there was an outline Joe made of Order of the Phoenix that went chapter by chapter, and it sort of followed, like, the major storylines for each chapter and talked about, like, what was going on and all that. And if I recall correctly, that outline had fewer chapters than the final book. I think it had, like, 30-something and, like, low 30s, and the book clocked in at 38.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that she wasn't planning to have another... Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that she wasn't planning the whole time to have 199 chapters. She just might have adapted the chapters of the next two books based off of how many chapters this book ended up having.
I mean, that seems like...
I'm not saying I necessarily believe that.
It seems like an extraordinarily restrictive way to write a book. You know, she sort of had so much she was working on and planning with ring theory to begin with that, I mean, basically, like, I, as a writer, can't conceive of being that rigid with chapters.
Yeah.
Like, I wouldn't put it past her, but I'm gonna lean towards no.
Yeah.
What about the rest of you? What do you think?
I would say no as well. I mean, I think we can chalk it probably up to a happy coincidence, but when you plan everything else out so well, I feel like you're entitled to a few happy coincidences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would also like to point out that we know one thing that she's very terrible at, and that's maths. So
That's true. That's true.
Oh my god, that's true. She would, like, add up the chapters wrong and think that, like, you know, Order of Phoenix 2 was the middle chapter or something.
Yeah, probably.
Oh, yeah, you were very right about that.
That's true. Well, anyway, either whether it's a happy coincidence or not, this is a really great hinge point, I think, for the series. So we start out with the chapter where the characters are speculating about the prophecy. We don't know yet that that's what they're talking about. They're talking about this weapon, but they're really talking about the prophecy, and that's what ends up driving the next 3 books. We also get introduced to our first Horcrux in this chapter that the trio is actually going to have to search for. Obviously, we had the diary before. And most of the information that they are going to need to find it. We get Regulus's story, or at least Sirius's version of it. We figure out that Kreacher tends to steal things that they are trying to throw out. And we also get a really small moment of Mundungust, who is just making a very small cameo in this chapter in connection to stolen goods. So he's been bringing these stolen cauldrons into the house. So that sort of also hints at the idea of Mundungust being the thief who stole the locket from Kreacher later on.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, go on, Irvin.
Agreed. So to backtrack a little bit about what I said, I don't think Jo planned it on, like, a chapter-by-chapter level, but I definitely do think she planned, like, this sort of vague area of the book to be the midpoint. So I do think a lot of it is intentional. And also, I think it's important to keep in mind that Order of the Phoenix is the first book she really took her time on. Because essentially the first 4 books came out, like, year after year after year. Like, bam, 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 one a year. Which, like, is frantic and terrifying and very rushed. And so basically, after Goblet of Fire, Jo was, A, so, like, stressed trying to finish Goblet of Fire in time, and B, so successful by that point that she could be like, no, you're gonna get Order of the Phoenix when you get it. And, like, that's that. So I feel like because she was taking that time, I think a lot of the, like, foreshadowing and, like, clue dropping feels a lot more intentional in Order of the Phoenix as a, like, no, like, this is a clue, this is, like, a thing I am deliberately, like, putting here in the text for you.
Yeah, there is a lot of foreshadowing in this book.
Just because I think in the earlier books, occasionally she would, like, you know, drop a name and then sort of go back later and be like, I dropped this name, let's do something with that. Whereas I feel sort of like this point on, it's all very much, like, intended.
Yeah, I think what we see her do in books 1 to 4, and she does do this in this chapter as well, is she'll, like, casually mention a character that is maybe not, you know, front and center, that you may have forgotten that was around, that then becomes really important in the climax of the same book. Whereas we, you know, the example here would be, we talk about the Malfoys, and especially Lucius Malfoy is mentioned, who we haven't really thought about since book 2, who is crucial at the end of this book because he leads the Death Eaters in the Ministry, the Department of Mysteries. And here, for the first time, we do see really well-crafted hints that are not becoming important this book, but 2 books from now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like you said, like, the Horcrux thing, I feel like it's sort of, like, this chapter is kind of the kickoff point, right? If the first half of the series, right, was about preventing Voldemort from coming back, right? Like, that's sort of the main arc that we're going for, is Voldemort keeps trying to come back by stone, by diary, by what have you, and Harry and Dumbledore are like, no, we have to, like, keep him at bay and not allow him to resurrect. That wraps up in Goblet of Fire. Like, Voldemort is back. We have, like, 5 chapters in Order of the Phoenix of, like, essentially, like, throat clearing, for lack of a better term. It's like, so, everyone, remember what happened? Remember how Harry's traumatized? Also Dementors, also Ministry nonsense, and Order of the Phoenix, yay! But, like, the second half of the series is largely about trying to defeat Voldemort once he's back. which, like, you do by destroying the Horcruxes. Like, that is sort of the overarching thing, I would say, in the latter half. And so this chapter is really sort of what kicks us off with, like, the prophecy and the Horcruxes. They're like, and here is the information to get us started on the second half of the series.
Also, so we're going to circle back to this later, but this is also a big turning point in Ginny's character in the series, so we'll touch on that later on. But another thing that I was noticing, which is just a very small mention here of the boggart that is in the cupboard there. And I think this boggart is really symbolic of a turning point in the series as well, because when we had boggarts in the third book, they were more of a symbol of sort of how Harry could sort of overcome his fear. Just even the whole ridiculous spell is a lot about sort of learning how to laugh at your fears, laugh them off. But this boggart in the fifth book, which is also a nice sort of mirror if we're thinking about ring theory, we know is later going to transform for Mrs. Weasley into every member of her family dead. And this is not something that Mrs. Weasley can just laugh off, because it's actually a pretty logical fear, and it turns out to be accurate that not all of her family is going to get through this war. And I think it's this fear that is haunting the next three books in the series, that not everyone is going to make it through this war. And another instance of foreshadowing that I find haunting is that even though they're trying to convince her that she's overreacting, all three of the people who come to comfort Mrs. Weasley in that scene, Sirius, Lupin, and Mad-Eye, all end up dead. And I think that is...
Holy shit.
Yes, I think that is on purpose.
I never picked up on that before, but that is brilliant and terrifying.
Right? It's horrifying.
I agree 100%. And I like to even take it one step further with the boggarts. I feel like it's symbolic in another similar way, but like every time we've seen a boggart up to this point, like you said, we've seen it kind of be like a funny sort of way to overcome fears, but like then Harry uses them as a tool essentially when learning the Patronus charm. Mm-hmm. You know, it's like it's looked as like a way to, you know, practice without real danger. But now in this case, this is the first time we actually see it be something dangerous. I mean, they're all treating it as if it's like a bomb about to go off in this desk, and they're like, let Mad-Eye look at it before we do anything stupid. And so like it just kind of like changes the whole tone of the series as like now Voldemort's back, and all of these perceived dangers that we had thought about for the last 11 years are now real again, or last 13, 14 years is now real again. It's now something that can actually hurt us.
I agree. I thought, I think I remember correctly, the first time I read this book, I was like, wait, why are we being so scared of a boggart? Like, you know, 2 books ago, like when there was a classroom full of 13-year-olds, we dealt with a boggart just fine. So it's always been sort of it's just sort of a easy thing you can laugh off, and it's, you know, a lesson a third year can do in Hogwarts. And then you very quickly learn, oh no, they're actually, you know, this is a justified reaction. It's good that they're, you know, waiting for Mad-Eye to clarify what it is first. And then they're trying to, you know, the idea is to do it as a team and not just do it on your own. So.
Yeah, which Lupin actually does say that, like, it's a lot easier to fight boggarts together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of ways, this chapter and sort of this part of the book is like where the series is growing up, just in terms of like how the characters act and relate to each other. And like, we're going to get into this a lot more with like more detail and stuff, but essentially like the way the Weasleys act, like this is the chapter where Ginny grows up. This is the chapter where the twins start treating Harry as more of an equal. This is the chapter where Boggart suddenly becomes scary. Like it is kind of a turning point, and it's definitely sort of no longer just for kids.
Yeah. I think one last thing that we haven't touched upon, and Adam, you've had some good points about that here in the doc, is Phineas is introduced for the very first time, which is not a another character that will become more important in Deathly Hallows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought it was just cool how there was like this little like, not, I can't say name drop, but like nameless drop where I think the line is, the blank picture on the wall was now breathing very slowly and very deeply as though its invisible occupant was sleeping. And we now know that that's Phineas, but at the time you just think it's some like, little quirky magic empty painting or something. You don't really understand what it is, but it comes to be very important, obviously, as the series goes on in the later books.
Yeah, and he's even name dropped when we look at the Black family tree.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So actually, to get into the portrait and Phineas, I feel like Order of the Phoenix is actually like the chapter where magical portraits come into their own, like as sort of thing. Because before Order of the Phoenix, the wizarding portraits were largely like useful decor. They sort of asked for passwords and, just hung out for the most part. But starting this book, like, we see the portraits actually, like, doing things that are very relevant to the plot. Think Phineas Nigellus, think, all the other former headmasters, the one in St. Mungo's, the one in the Ministry. So, yeah, I feel like Joe's very good about, like, early on in each book, like, introducing, like, whatever new magic we need to know about. And so I feel like this is one of the things in Order where she's like, and this is magic that we're going to be using this book, just FYI.
Yeah.
It's another good mini ring, I guess, to book 3, because that's the other book where we see portraits quite a lot with Sir Cadogan, with Sirius attacking the fat lady.
Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
If anything, I feel like the portraits all become, kind of relevant in the odd number books, right? Because, well, sort of, kind of in Sorcerer's Stone, but, like, the Fat Lady's absence is what sends the trio, running to discover, wait, sorry, I had a thought. When they go find Fluffy, is it because the Fat Lady isn't there?
Well, they were going to the duel, but the reason that Hermione and Neville, I think, couldn't get back in was because the Fat Lady
gone.
Wasn't there. So they followed Harry and Ron to the duel.
Yeah, okay. I knew there was some role that the Fat Lady played. So yeah, that's in Sorcerers. In Prisoner, there's the whole, like, Sir Cadogan thing, getting slashed by Sirius. Then we have Order of the Phoenix, then we have Phineas Nigellus in Deathly Hallows. So yeah, I just feel like maybe that's sort of the 1-3-5-7 pattern.
And Harry talks to Dumbledore at the end through the portrait.
So
yes.
How long do you think Phineas Nigellus's portrait has been in that house? Like, has Dumbledore always kind of been able to use that portrait to check in on Sirius when Sirius was a kid, or to check in on Regulus to see what he's doing as a budding Death Eater, or would the residents of the house not want people at Hogwarts to be able to spy on them? Like, I don't know, that was sort of something I was realizing this time around is this a new addition, or has he always been there?
I don't think Phineas would, openly spy on his family just because Dumbledore's like, oh, I'm curious.
Yeah.
He's not really helpful.
But isn't Phineas required in some way, like, to some extent, isn't Phineas required to serve the current headmaster?
Not so much, because the headmasters are, quote, honor-bound to serve the current
Oh, so
head.
you're saying that Phineas just has no honor. All right, I guess that might be true.
Also, I guess it's how do you define helping the headmaster? I think it's different to when, he does help them a little bit in Deathly Hallows, or when Dumbledore says, can you please do this? Because it actually, is a high-stakes situation to, Dumbledore sitting at his desk and be like, I'm curious, can you just check in on the Black family? For which reason?
That's fair.
I don't think it's any coincidence, though, that the portrait is in the room that Harry is staying. Like, I feel like it probably wasn't in that room prior to Harry coming to Grimmauld Place. Like, it might have been more central in the house somewhere. And then when Harry came to Grimmauld Place, Dumbledore said, let's put this portrait in here just to kind of keep tabs on Harry.
Oh, see, I thought it went the other way. I think the portrait was probably there, and Dumbledore was like, this is the room Harry should stay in.
That's what I thought, too.
Yep. Definitely this one. Just the feng shui screams Harry Potter.
Yes. Either way, it definitely, I think, is on purpose. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, 100% it's on purpose.
It's like the one time Ron saw him, he was like, hello, Ronald. You should be in this room, I thought. There's a bed for Harry.
Yeah. Exactly.
Just to touch real quick on, I think someone had said like Dumbledore spying on like budding Death Eaters or something like that. The one thing that I think this, I mean, it might be a stretch, but it's, I think, another example of like Death Eaters, or I mean, I know Black family aren't all Death Eaters except for Regulus, but like underestimating power which they consider like beneath them. And like, I don't think they would have ever thought like, oh, that portrait could somehow be used against us. Like, they would almost like overlook that, kind of how they do like house elves and other things, and that like it just kind of like reminded me of that.
Yeah.
That's
fair.
As a counterpoint, I also don't think Dumbledore would bother checking on Regulus. Well, because sort of by the time like Dumbledore is like interested enough in Sirius to like check in on him over the summer holidays, Sirius is gone from there. And like Dumbledore does not have the time to be checking in on every, you know, teenager in Slytherin who is thinking of joining up with the Death Eaters. I think he just sort of had too much on his plate. So I think it's a bit of a moot point. I mean, to be honest,
it's not that much work. Like, he's not the one doing it. If he was just like, Phineas, go and sort of take the pulse of like what's being talked about in this big pureblood household, like get a sense of what's going on, what the conversation is. I don't think that's really much work for him. It's a lot of work for Phineas, who probably resents it, but I don't know. It's a possibility.
Yeah, I don't know. My impression of Dumbledore is that he was so frazzled trying to just like keep up with the war effort, you know, sort of protect the Potters and fight Voldemort and... Oh, well, no, this was pre-Potters and all that. But essentially, like, Dumbledore was trying to fight the war and, like, influence society because a lot of people, like the Blacks, you know, thought Voldemort had the right idea. I think just Dumbledore would have been using every waking moment on, like, either actively fighting Voldemort or on, like, you know, popping in and out of the Ministry in Hogwarts trying to, you know, influence hearts and minds.
Yeah.
While Minerva was running the school.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. And probably, now I'm thinking of it, Phineas probably just just neglected to mention that he had another portrait there. And it's probably not until Order of the Phoenix that, like, Dumbledore is walking around the Black House and is like, oh, Phineas, look, you're here. And then decides to use it.
Yeah. I think it would have gone similarly to when Harry asks Kreacher to spy on Draco, and Kreacher comes back and he's like, Draco brushes his teeth in the bathroom. He attends classes in a wide variety of classrooms. I feel like if Dumbledore asked Phineas to spy on his own family, that is what he would get, being like, Regulus, you know, goes to the bathroom to brush his teeth. He lies in bed reading, you know, magazines and clipping out all the articles about Voldemort. Like... Yeah, I don't think Phineas would have been particularly helpful.
That's very fair.
Now I'm imagining Death Eater Weekly, the magazine, all about Voldemort.
Oh my god, yes.
This is how you can also become more snake-like.
How to reduce your nose size.
I mean, I bet they 100% sell it in Nocturne Alley. You know, it's a periodical.
Yes.
Yeah. I had a really, not big point here, but do we really think Mrs. Weasley thought Ginny was going to be asleep, or is she just sort of wishfully thinking this into existence?
I think she's definitely trying to manifest it as in the like, well, if I walk past their doors often enough, implying that I think they're asleep, they'll have no choice but to go to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. I think she's telling Hermione, don't talk to Ginny. And that's sort of how she's saying it. I don't know. Yeah, I don't think she thinks Ginny's actually asleep.
Also, there is a line here that cracks me up every time. Like, after Harry and Ron have been talking with the twins against Mrs. Weasley's express wishes, she, like, comes up to check on them, and after she leaves, she doesn't trust us at all, you know, said Ron regretfully.
Wonder why that is.
Yeah. I do wonder, though, like, Ron sort of mentions that they're not allowed to send many owls because this needs to be a secret order meeting point. But, like, what's the point of all the protective charms and a hidden house if you then can't use owls? Or is it just because there's so many people in the house with the potential of sending owls?
Yeah, I think it's sort of the volume, you know, like, think back to, like, the first chapter of Sorcerer's Stone, like, when you have, like, 30 owls flying in broad daylight, like, people notice.
Well, I mean, it's never clarified if the neighbors thought it was odd. No one ever really comments on that in Privet Drive, at least.
No, it's on the news. Like,
I'm sort of joking.
Yeah.
So I thought it was kind of an interesting thing, funny thing, when Fred and George apparate into Harry and Ron's room, and they land right on Ron's knees, and they chalk that up to, like, yeah, it's harder to apparate in the dark. And I just was sort of thinking, like, is it really harder to apparate in the dark? Were they just, you know, being lazy and using that as an excuse? Were they intentionally going on his knees to make a little bit of a prank? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
So I am apparently I would be a very gullible younger brother because I absolutely believed them on this. Just because there's a lot of, like, visualizing in apparition, like in Half-Blood Prince when we're actually learning how to apparate. You know, Wilkie Twycross and his 3Ds. Step 1, fix your mind firmly upon the desired destination. Step 2, focus your determination to occupy the visualized space. So it sounds like the magic of apparition, like, would take you to the place that you are visualizing. So maybe, like, you need to visualize the place, like, as it is. Like, so if you're visualizing something that's, like, brightly lit, but it's pitch black, like, that'll throw off your apparition. Or if you, like, are visualizing a dark space, that's not helpful because it's unspecific, you know, like, all pitch black rooms look exactly alike, because on account of being pitch black. So I thought it was just, like, the twins being straight up about that. But I have also never been a younger brother, so
Clearly.
I don't see how visualization is, you know, impacted by the light situation, because you're imagining the place in your head, so you can imagine it with lights.
Yeah, I think that either they're not super accurate at their apparating, or they did it on purpose and knew that Ron couldn't argue with it because Ron doesn't know how to apparate. So, yeah, I think it's an older brother just, like, you know, kind of messing with their younger brother.
Also, I mean, they both go on Ron's bed, so I think that's another clue for it was probably on purpose.
Right.
True, like, if it was accidental, one would have been on top of the dresser and the other one would have been, like, smack in the middle of the floor or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, part of that is just my, like, twin blindness, where I was like, of course the Weasley twins would apparate to the exact same spot. Like, they're attached at the hip.
What would happen if two people apparate to the same spot at the same time?
Oof.
I guess it would be, like, reverse splinching. They'd, like, fuse.
Oh, no.
You know, it would be like Dragon Ball Z, like, fusion! Ha!
I think they would just fall on top of each other. Like, I think it would just be a pile of people, not, like... I don't think there'd be a magical response.
I mean, fine. Seems like a boring answer, but okay.
Sorry to crush your dreams.
I kind of agreed with Irvin there, just because, like, we do see some pretty intense cases of, like, splinching, like, with Ron, obviously, and then, like, when they're learning apparition, I think it's Susan Bones that get splinched and they're like, her whole leg was like just left behind, like, and it was like pretty graphic. Like they were like very shocked that it was like what they were seeing. They like didn't picture splinching to be so graphic. And so like there has to be, like, I would think there'd have to be some kind of like either like magical protection against that, or that the consequences could be pretty serious. And that's why you need a license to like make sure you're not, you know, making those decisions to apparate at the same time as someone in the exact same spot.
But we do actually know that you can accidentally apparate on top of someone else, because Charlie, I just looked up this quote, Charlie, it says he took the test twice. He failed the first time, apparated 5 miles south where he meant to, right on top of some poor old deer doing her shopping, remember? So if someone's already there, you can just apparate on top of them.
But I always interpreted that to mean Charlie apparated literally on top of her, not like where she was, but like sort of 2 feet above her, and then like sort of cartoon style like crashes down on this poor old deer.
And I think it would make a difference, like if there's already someone there, you couldn't occupy their physical space, so you'd like go to the next available space, like right above or right beside or right below, you know, something like that. But if you're both apparating at the exact same nanosecond, like you'd have to both materialize in some way. And like I said, maybe there's magical protection against like where it would push you both to the side, but if not, it could be pretty intense.
Yeah.
I mean, question. We only hear one crack, do we? At least it's only described as one noise. It's not like two.
Oh, that's a good question.
Are they like side-along apparating? Because they're going to the same place?
Maybe they are.
It does just say crack.
It does just say crack. I always assumed that's because it was simultaneous, because, again, attached at the hip. Yeah, I don't think they're side-along apparating. I feel like sort of both twins are ambitious enough to, like, apparate on their own.
Yeah, I mean, it could also just not have been described in that great a detail.
Or they're just doing it really at the same moment, so it just...
Yeah.
It's 2 cracks at the same moment, so you just hear it as one louder one or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, this is an interesting moment with Fred and George kind of for the first time actively seeking out Harry and Ron to discuss things that are going on at Hogwarts or just in the world at large. So maybe this is a sign that they see Harry and Ron as more on equal footing with them now. Maybe just because they're getting older. I mean, that's my experience with my siblings is like, as you get older, some of those age differences matter less. So you're more likely to have some of those real conversations with them. And also just Friend George in general in this book start to join in more with some of these group dynamics, not just focusing on each other. For example, Dumbledore's army. And they sort of really see Harry as a leadership figure in Dumbledore's army. I don't know if it's partly because Harry sort of gains the twins' respect and gratitude through giving them the money at the end of Goblet of Fire. And I wonder if they're just sort of, if that just sort of changes some of the power dynamics in their relationship so that they're more on an equal footing there.
It's curious with Harry in particular, because the twins, I think, have always respected Harry more anyway, because from his first year, he was on the Quidditch team and he was the star of the Quidditch team to a degree. You know, he was the seeker, and the seekers end the game and usually make sure the team wins. Mm-hmm. So, and he's led them to winning the cup in his 3rd year.
Yeah.
So
I think they've always respected Harry, but like, it's not like they've gone to him to ask questions in the same way of like, oh, what do you think about this thing that's going on? Like, I feel like the last time that we really saw that Harry, Fred, George dynamic of them sort of helping each other out maybe was when they gave Harry the Marauder's map. And it was definitely more of like, they're helping Harry out and by giving him this thing.
Yeah.
Whereas here they're coming to Harry and Ron and asking for their opinion and like sort of valuing that opinion instead of just chatting with each other about it. which I think is like a significant shift. I don't think it's that they didn't respect Harry before, but I think that more in the way of like, they still saw him as someone who they're taking under their wings. And in this book, it's like Harry is sort of more at an equal level of them, or they're looking up to him as more of a leadership figure.
I think also the Tri-Visiting tournament could have had a huge impact on that.
Yeah.
That Harry, as the 14-year-old, was able to keep up with the 17-year-olds.
You know, I thought that about the Triwizard Tournament at first, but, like, Harry's done really impressive stuff, sort of, you know, from the beginning. You know, he faced off against Quirrell, which is a complete secret, so everybody knows about it. But also he, like, went down to the Chamber of Secrets and, like, saved Ginny, and, like, you know, slayed a basilisk and emerged with a sword. And I feel like the twins must know, like, I mean, a decent amount of that, at least.
Yeah.
So I don't think, like, Harry being impressive, would make him appear in their eyes. I think it is, I mean, part of it is the age thing, of course, but a larger part of it, I think, is the fact that he gave them the Triwizard winnings, just because that's a grown-up thing, like, that happened, right? Like, sort of, until now, it was sort of all fun and games at Hogwarts, but the Weasley twins are trying to sort of think about their lives beyond Hogwarts and, like, starting a business and everything, and so Harry sort of, in a very real way, helping them found the business, I feel like would sort of make him appear in their eyes, sort of much more than any fancy magic he would do.
Yeah, and
that was a good point.
We see that in the conversations they have with him about the skiving snack boxes and stuff. They're not, like, Harry seems to be the one person who they're telling about this in this moment, and that they're having those conversations. And I think that's really because of those Triwizard winnings. Now they're like, okay, like, Harry is someone who we can go to and tell about these things that we're trying to do, and that we can have more of those sort of peer-like conversations with.
I agree with all that, and I think maybe not the Triwizard Tournament itself, but just the fact that, like, they now know that Voldemort's back, and like the tone, and I mean, they've moved out of their house, they're living in the headquarters of the Order of the Phoenix. Like, they are sort of like, they realize that, like, shit's about to go down, and for lack of a better term, and they're looking at it like, okay, like, as many people as Voldemort has killed, Harry watched him come back, was outnumbered by the Death Eaters, escaped Voldemort. Like, they may have looked at some of the other stuff that he did. The Triwizard Tournament included, like, all the things that happened, like, at Hogwarts, even in the Chamber of Secrets, as kind of like school things, and now this was like real world application. Like, he was out there on his own, survived, and, you know, I mean, they might just look at him as like more of an adult. And I think what everyone has said about the winnings probably plays more into it, but I think more too, they look at him as like maybe a little bit of a rallying point, even before he's needed to be the rallying point for the Resistance.
Let me ask you, could there be an element of, like, closing ranks because of Percy? Because we know Percy, like, sided with the Ministry, and said that, you know, he doesn't respect his parents and he doesn't believe Harry. And so I feel like, you know, the twins put themselves in opposition to Percy. So if Percy is leaving the family and doesn't believe Harry, then the twins are going to be like, no, Harry's our guy, like, we stand with him and our family. And so I feel like that might be playing into it, maybe even subconsciously, but, like, making them respect Harry more and want to demonstrate that they respect him.
Yeah. I think they're realizing firsthand, actually, even before Harry is, that this is going to be a really difficult year for Harry, that nobody's going to believe him, that people are already trying to discredit him. So yeah, I think they want to show Harry that they're on his side and that they're supporting him. Yeah, I think that might be a motivation there.
And I think we don't really know what the rest of the Order have sort of hinted at or talked about, or what they were able to overhear. But I do think they can sort of glean that Harry is important. So that may also be another thing where it's like, okay, all of these adults in their meetings that we're not allowed to go to do think Harry is really important.
Well, also, there's the fact that when Harry showed up, the adults treated him differently, right?
Yeah.
Because the Weasleys have been living at Grimmauld Place for most of the summer, and, you know, all the kids, I'm sure, have been, like, begging and pleading and being like, you know, we want to know what's going on, and then all the grown-ups are like, yeah, sure, like, you know, go play in your room. But then Harry shows up, and suddenly all the adults are treating him, like, not as an equal, but, like, as someone to, like, you know, inform and someone to talk to and consult. So I think a lot of it might be the Fred and George taking their cues from how the grown-ups are treating Harry and being like, oh, like, he's worthy of consideration.
I love that. I think that is what I'm going to go with when I think about it.
Yeah. It's a great question, though. Like, I kind of never thought about it. I just always, like, went with it before. So well done, Sophia.
It's also interesting because, you know, we all go through this as we grow up. Suddenly the big scary adults are sort of our peers. And Fred and George leave school at the end of this book, or at the middle of this book. I don't know. Sometime in this book. So, you know, effectively entering the adult world fully, because they may now be 17, but they're still going to school. So it's sort of a bigger step almost, because you're leaving school and you're entering the adult world.
Yeah, it's very hard for me to imagine because, like, you know, I went to college after high school and all that, and, like, you know, stayed living at home. So, like, I wasn't, like, entering the adult world until, like, my early to mid-20s. So, it, like, I imagine it's very different doing it at 18, the way the Weasley twins did.
Yeah. Talking about what they are gossiping, or discussing, do we think the weapon is a good description for what we know is the prophecy? Or do we think this is like purposely chosen word that will throw them off the actual scent of what it is?
Me. Choose me.
Yes, Irvin.
I have thoughts about this. I have feelings, and I am most displeased. Because it is all Dumbledore's fault.
Okay.
I went into this in my Dumbledore book, Dumbledore, The Life and Lies, available now, on the page, like, 97, 98, I think. But basically, I think that the only person who knows it's not a weapon is Dumbledore. Because the way they all talk about it, I don't think it's a weapon. I don't think you can call the prophecy a weapon. It doesn't really make sense. Dumbledore, like, tries to, like, get around it at the end of the year. He's like, this is the weapon Voldemort has been seeking so assiduously, the knowledge of how to destroy you. And I was like, nope, I call bullshit. Because even if Dumbledore thinks that, like, the prophecy is a weapon, I can't imagine Sirius, of all people, thinking of it the same way. Because Sirius is the one who calls it a weapon, and sort of no one argues with him when he does. But Sirius, like, brash Gryffindor, like, run into battle Sirius, would not call the knowledge of how to destroy him a weapon. That would not be the word that came to his mind. So I always viewed that as evidence that the Order didn't know what they were guarding. Which, like, I think is pretty damning, an indictment of Dumbledore, and, like, the fact that he's asking the Order to essentially risk their lives to some extent, guarding something that they don't know. So, yes, sorry, this question kind of set me off because I spent years being like, weapon, that is such a lame weapon, it's not a weapon, and then realized that, no, it's because Dumbledore is kind of scary.
Do you think that it's possible that the Order of the Phoenix knew that it was a prophecy, but not what the prophecy said? Because, like, you're right, it's very underwhelming when we find out, like, how to destroy Harry is really no more than just neither can live while the other survives. But, like, do you think Dumbledore maybe insinuated to the Order that, like, you know, the prophecy contained something along the lines of, like, you have to cast this curse at this day, at this conditions, and that will kill Harry Potter or something, you know what I mean? Like something more specific, or some knowledge that to Harry's one weakness that no one else knows about, or something, just something that would lead them, like you said, to risk their lives. Because I was thinking of when the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, I believe at one point Harry or Neville says like the prophecy broke or something, and I don't know if it's Lupin or Sirius or something, but they're like, it's fine, like just go. But like they weren't like, prophecy, what? Like never heard of that. Or like I think they were aware that it was a prophecy. I just don't think that it was known to them that the prophecy was pretty much a decoy of meaningless information.
Wait, really? I want to find that quote. So Sirius yells, "Harry, take the prophecy, grab Neville, and run," at one point.
Yeah. So I guess he did know it was a prophecy.
I mean, the question is, does he know in the moment that we are discussing now, or was he informed some time on the way to before he dies? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think that...
Wait, no, because before Sirius says that, one of the Death Eaters is trying to choke Harry and says, "Give me the prophecy." And Harry is holding it. So I feel like once the order arrives, they see Harry with the prophecy that the Death Eaters are trying to get. So, and, you know, they are like, that must be the thing that we are all here for. But I don't think we have any evidence that they knew about the prophecy beforehand.
No, I don't think so either. But it does say, like you said, Harry says, like right after Tonks falls at Bellatrix's hand, it says, Harry, take the prophecy, grab Neville, and run. So, like, Sirius had to know that the prophecy was important.
Yeah. I think that, Adam, your idea that maybe Dumbledore was just not honest about what the prophecy was about, I think that kind of makes sense. And he told them to call it a weapon, or to treat, or maybe he didn't tell them to call it a weapon, but maybe they started thinking of it as a weapon because they think it's going to give Voldemort the information to destroy Harry. That kind of makes sense to me.
I don't know. I just can't get past Sirius calling it a weapon. Just because he always struck me as a very literal guy. So I think, like, he would have thought it was, like, a weapon, if he volunteered that word.
But he doesn't want Harry to know what it is. Like... Or at least he doesn't want the other people in the room to know that he's trying to tell Harry what it is, if that's what he is trying to do. He's trying to be a little bit sneaky in his wording there. Like, he's kind of hesitant. So, I don't know. It seems possible that is his way of trying to communicate it, or trying to communicate it without the other people in the room getting mad at him for doing so.
I mean, we know the Order starts doing guard duty, but even then it's outside the Department of Mystery, so even then they wouldn't necessarily know that what they're guarding is in the Hall of Prophecies, or that there is a Hall of Prophecies for that matter, because really, you know, what we've been told is the larger wizarding population isn't aware what's inside the Department of Mysteries.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do see Irvin's point about Sirius being, you know, Sirius choosing the words weapon to describe something that he knows isn't, you know, an actual weapon would seem to be out of character to me as well.
I agree with that for sure, too. Maybe he doesn't know exactly what it is at that point, but learns later. But I think that's a stretch also.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, because I was looking up the battle, right? None of them say anything after the prophecy is smashed, because sort of like the prophecy smashes and like Dumbledore shows up like 5 seconds later. So the only comment we get is Sirius yelling at Harry to take the prophecy and go, when Harry's like holding the prophecy in his hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, it's also a battle, so how much time do you have to talk about things? So...
if you're Voldemort, all the time in the world. The boy likes a monologue.
So...
Yeah, assuming you're not Voldemort.
Why do you think that Sirius wanted to tell Harry about the quote-unquote weapon?
Because in the conversation, like, the whole time Sirius wants to volunteer information, and and Mrs. Weasley doesn't, with Lupin and Arthur kind of playing mediator between the two. But Sirius is very much the, like, pro-tell Harry things.
But why?
Adult there.
Why would he want to tell Harry all the things?
I mean, maybe not all things, but most of things. Part of it is the fact that he, like, you know, has a lot of confusing feelings about Harry and, like, you know, kind of wants Harry to be James, and, like, to be a peer because, you know, Sirius doesn't have many friends at this point. Part of it might be that Sirius was badly burned by the Order not sharing information last time. That last time, you know, with the Fidelius charm and the Secret Keepers and the last-minute switch and not trusting each other, ended up with Sirius carted off to Azkaban for 12 years and falsely accused of murder. So I think Sirius might just be, like, in a pro-disclosure mindset in general, and then also just wants Harry to be treated as more of an adult.
What I was wondering about, and I'm curious what you guys think of this, but, if Sirius is trying to get Harry to sort of be on guard, because maybe he's been told there's a prophecy, maybe he hasn't, but I'd imagine they've at least told the Order members that whatever Voldemort's plan is, he's trying to get something, or this weapon or whatever, or the prophecy, and the only two people who can get it are Harry and Voldemort, who can actually, like, pick it up. So I was wondering if Sirius sort of wants Harry to be on guard in a way, and sort of wants him to be aware that there's something that Voldemort is looking for, and maybe if he had more time would have tried to make it clear to Harry that he should be sort of wary of what Voldemort might do to get it, because he says, like, there are some things that Voldemort can only get by stealth. So it seems sort of like maybe he's hinting at this idea that Harry needs to sort of be on guard because of Voldemort's search for this weapon. So, I'm gonna disagree a bit, because the fact that only Harry and Voldemort can pick up the prophecies isn't known at first. Because that's a revelation for Voldemort it isn't
from Rookwood.
It isn't known from Voldemort. That doesn't mean the Order doesn't know it.
Right, but Dumbledore's whole gambit this year is to essentially release no information for fear that Voldemort will find it out. Sort of, if no one knows that only Harry and Voldemort can pick it up, there's much less chance of Voldemort finding it out, and then Dumbledore's decoy of the prophecy works for many, many more months, while Voldemort, you know, has useless schemes about imperiousing people and sending Death Eaters in.
Yeah, I think also we need to keep in mind that the Order has members named Snape, who are in close contact with Voldemort, as well as Mundungus, who doesn't seem to be the type of person who you would trust with, you know, big important secrets. So I could see that if anything, he told a very selected few.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think Dumbledore would be especially wary of telling anyone anything after Mad-Eye Moody, right? Because one of his closest friends and confidants turns out to have been a Death Eater in disguise for a year. I think Dumbledore is going to be even more circumspect in revealing sensitive information than before now. Yeah.
That's fair.
I also don't think that Sirius is to be given that much credit here. I think at the end of the day, he has stunted growth because he was in Azkaban for 12 years. He is the type of character from what we do see, even when he's, young, that likes to stir things up, that likes to just, throw throw something in the mix and see what happens. So I think he is more sort of, he's already going into a slight depression. He's back in the house that he never wanted to be back in. He's stuck here. He's not allowed to leave. He can't really do much. Snape's teasing him about it. So finally Harry's here and he just he wants to make things more exciting for himself. And he wants to be, he's pushing really hard to include him because he thinks that'll, move things along from, just boring meetings where nothing seems to be happening and he can't do anything anyways.
Oh my god. So you think Sirius is like trying to get Harry informed because then Harry will keep Sirius in his confidence? Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. Sorry. I'm not the biggest fan. I'm just glad Sam's not here to hate me. Sorry, Sam.
I also think Sirius is a realist in the way of like, he just watched like Harry be told nothing all summer, and Harry didn't even know that he had like guard protection detail on him like 24/7. And like, look how that worked out. Harry almost got expelled, he did get attacked by Dementors, like could have turned out a whole lot worse. And I think it could be possible that Sirius is just like, all right, like Harry has to know he's the important part of this resistance, like, and he's going to be, so let's just tell him, like, quit treating him like a child. And I don't think anybody else is just ready to hear that. And I think the point about him thinking that he's James or having those confusing feelings is also a definite contributing factor, that like he wants to feel like him and James are back talking about this kind of stuff.
That's a good point, because Sirius probably knows Harry better than almost any of the other adults there. Like, I'd say Sirius knows Harry better than any of the adults present other than Lupin.
What about the Weasleys? He did stay with them.
He stayed with them for like a month. Like, I think they care about him a lot, but I don't think they know him the way, like, someone fully in his confidence would, right? Because, like, he talks to Sirius and Lupin about, like, the things that are bothering him, about, like, his crazy theories about Snape and Death Eaters and all that kind of stuff. I don't think he is quite as forthcoming with the Weasleys. Yeah,
we only really see him be forthcoming with Arthur when he, like, needs to be. Like, he wants him to check out Draco Malfoy or check out Lucius Malfoy or like, he kind of, like, uses Arthur as, like, I don't want to say, like, a means, but, he doesn't ask Arthur's opinion, at least not early on.
Yeah, I think Harry becomes much more comfortable with the Weasleys the later books and does become forthcoming with them. But that's after staying with them throughout Order of the Phoenix, for the Christmas holidays, for the summer holidays, after spending a lot more time together, and also after losing Sirius as an option for, like, the adult in his life. Sirius and Lupin both in Half-Blood Prince, which is a whole nother conversation. But yeah, I think sort of, because at this point he stayed with them in Chamber of Secrets for a month. He stayed with them in Goblet of Fire for a month. So he spent
time with them in
a little bit.
Yeah,
in Diagon Alley they spent some time together.
Like a day.
No, it's like 2 weeks, I think. And,
No. He's in Diagon Alley for 2 weeks. The Weasleys show up on, like, the last night.
Oh, okay.
So he's essentially stayed 2.5 months with the Weasleys, probably on his best behavior, like, with a family who actually likes him that he doesn't want to mess up. So I think it's a different vibe.
But he's barely spent any time in person with Sirius.
Yeah.
Yes, but they write back and forth to each other and chat in the flu.
I agree that it's different in that, like, Sirius is more in his confidants, but the Weasleys know Harry better, like, on a day-to-day basis than Sirius does.
I don't know if I agree with that.
They don't necessarily know his internal life as well as Sirius does, but, like, they have seen Harry hanging out, interacting with people, all of that, in a way that Sirius never has. This is really the first time that he's spending time with Sirius over any extended point of time.
Is telling that Arthur is the one that tells Harry about Sirius breaking out of Azkaban.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think the Weasleys know Harry better than we potentially are giving them credit for.
I mean, I also feel like he's usually with the Weasleys when he's happy and carefree. You know, like, all the times he spent with them were, like, the summer, beginning of the year, nothing to worry about. Whereas he deals with Sirius when he's in crisis. So I feel like just in terms of that, Sirius has a much better idea of how Harry reacts, like, when in distress than the Weasleys would.
I don't know. I mean, I think the fact that Arthur, like, tells him about Sirius and says, like, kind of no matter what you hear, like, you know, just promise me you don't go looking for him. And, like, that, I think, shows that Mr. Weasley knows Harry. That he knows that Harry's the type of person that he should get that information, but if he gets too much information, he might act on it in a slightly rash way. And I think that we see this as a space of that balance, too, where it's like, okay, Mr. Weasley is like, yes, Harry should get some information, but there should be a balance because he knows that Harry is going to, if he gets too much, he might just make rash decisions.
Which is interesting because this could have worked here as well. Because it worked much better in Prisoner. Like, Harry didn't seek out to find Sirius. He did eventually find him, but it's more down to Sirius, you know, dragging Ron into the, what's it called? Shrieking Shack. Yeah.
Yes, but also it was a close call because at one, like, over Christmas in Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry's very much like, I'm gonna find him, I'm gonna kill him, he betrayed my parents. And Ron and Hermione are like, no, bring it down all the notches.
But, like, and the same way here, if you were to tell Harry, there is something that only you and Voldemort can retrieve from the Ministry, and Voldemort's very keen to get it from the Ministry, so no matter what happens or what you may see, don't ever go there and tell someone from the Order. Like, I think that would have been, you know, that would have still not given away too much. It would still not have given Voldemort clues. And it would have, you know, made much more sense to Harry as to why he's seeing visions of places in the Ministry. And he would have been like, oh no, I'm not supposed to go there.
Well, so, I mean, but this is all on Dumbledore. Like, the Order, I think, doesn't know that information to tell him. Oh, yes. No, the fact that Dumbledore doesn't tell Harry anything, real dumb. Not a fan.
And that he doesn't start out with occlumency. Like, occlumency should have been from the first, so that he could tell Harry stuff.
So what we're learning is Arthur is the better father figure to Dumbledore. But, I mean, no surprise. He has, like, what, a million kids?
Obviously. Listeners, if there is a single solitary one of you who thinks Dumbledore is a better father figure than Arthur, I want to hear from you. Like, please reach out on social media, email us at 3broomstickspod@gmail.com. Like, leave a comment because I want to hear this perspective if anyone can make the case.
Well, I certainly derailed us with my silly little question here.
Right, wait, what were we debating?
What is it good to call it a weapon?
Verdict? No.
So speaking of weapons,
yeah.
I thought it was interesting when they were all Fred, George, Harry, and Ron were all speculating like what the weapon was and what it could be. Like they say like, do you think it could be something that kills multiple people at once? And I think, like, it was just interesting to me. Like, I wonder if Voldemort had ever considered, like, making Avada Kedavra, like, a spell that could, like, branch out and, like, hit more than one people. Because we do see him battle more than one person a few times, or at least once in the Battle of Hogwarts, and maybe other times, too. But I know that one is the one I thought of in particular.
Yeah, so it's a good question. My first thought would be that there are, like, I mean, first of all, there are ways to kill multiple people at once. Like, Voldemort doesn't need Avada Kedavra for that, because the blast that Pettigrew used to escape killed a dozen Muggles. So, like, you know, if you really do need, like, a mass killing, you just make a big boom and people are dead. But wizarding battles are a lot more about precision than mass killings. You know, it's not so much like trench warfare where, like, you know, two sides of a million wizards run at each other. It's much more like a melee, like, I especially because wizards can move around, they can teleport, so, like, there'll never be two clearly delineated sides, so I don't think there would be, like, a good way to target multiple people with Avada Kedavra, because, right, like, because you cast a spell, you, like, cast it, like, in a direction, and, like, hope that it hits your target, so I can't think of, like, a way that would target multiple people with a spell that would take less, like, mental energy than just casting multiple Avada Kedavras.
I think I just want to add, I'm now even more mad at Deathly Hallows Part 2, because we do see two sides running against each other.
I know, it's so dumb.
That's true.
Because, like, that's such a great thing about the Battle of Hogwarts and, like, the Battle of the Tower and battles in general, that it's never just, like, the, yeah! It's always, like, you know, complete chaos. And I feel like it gives you a much different vibe. It's much less, you know, gladiator and much more like, wow, war sucks.
Yeah.
It also bothered me in Deathly Hallows Part 2 that multiple people were seen apparating throughout, like, the towers and stuff, and it was just like, no.
I think by that point all the rules were just off the table. It's like, this is all the rules we have established for 6 movies, now delete them and let's just do whatever we want.
Yeah. And then Harry and Voldemort hug and go flying.
And their faces melt or whatever.
I hated that. I don't know about anybody else's opinion, but I was like, just have the battle.
Yeah.
Right. No. But yeah, so, like, I think if you were in, like, a 3-on-1 scenario with, like, the way Voldemort was, I think he could just sort of try to knock out the opponents one by one. And again, we're getting into how Voldemort casts killing curses. I think we discussed this on another podcast a while back. But essentially, like, do you say a quick Avada Kedavra, or do you do what Voldemort does in the movies and, like, take your time with it? Avada Kedavra!
And, like, mid-speech, someone is, like, attacking him. Yeah. I think something that is really crucial about dueling in the wizarding world is creativity. Like, the more creative you are with the spells you have, you know, at your disposal, the more of an advantage you have. Because you could, like, you know, make something cave in, or, like, use other, like, materials, objects around you to attack the other person, or, you know, use spells like bombard, like, what's the one that explode stuff? Like, you don't have to use the killing curse to kill people.
And Confringo.
You don't have to use the killing curse to kill people if you're just creative enough.
Yeah.
And if you use your you know, surroundings to your advantage. So I think it's just another way of showing that Voldemort was actually sort of very simple-minded when he's dueling, which is a bit sad, actually, because it could have been much, much more epic.
The only time
when Voldemort has a worthy opponent,
right,
we, like, see him go to town.
Yeah, with Dumbledore, we see more of that magic, like, creative
but
magic.
Also because Dumbledore just uses objects to block his killing curses, so he's like, okay, I can't do that, so I need to do something else. That's
true.
I really loved the tiny little throwaway comment when they talk about the weapon, when they're discussing it very quickly, dismissing if it could be hidden at Hogwarts, because, you know, the sort of thing that we see throughout the series is, like, there's 3 secure places, and it's the Ministry, it's Gringotts, and it's Hogwarts, because that's where stuff is that is important.
And Harry breaks into all 3 in Deathly Hallows.
Yeah. And that's the sort of poetry behind that. It's like Harry is like, nope, I'm gonna sneak in on all of those places.
I wonder if you think this was a bit of foreshadowing, like the weapon being hidden at Hogwarts. Is that foreshadowing to like the final Horcrux being hidden at Hogwarts?
I like that.
I mean, at the end of the day, Harry is hidden at Hogwarts, and they need Harry to come out of Hogwarts to get to the prophecy. So it's not even wrong if you widen your perspective.
Well, because if we're going by Dumbledore's definition of the weapon is the knowledge of how to destroy Harry, that knowledge is hidden at Hogwarts in Dumbledore's pensieve.
Yeah.
True.
So they got it right. they were absolutely right here.
Yeah. And I think as we're talking about weapon and if it's a good word, it's very funny to me that, you know, Harry's like muggle upbringing is like seeping through when he dreams about it. And he's like thinking about this like creature made out of cannons and stuff, where he's like very much thinking of muggle war weapons.
That was such a cute visual to me, and like it's times like these I wish the movies were animated, because can't you just see like little animated cannons running around?
Yeah.
Totally.
And Hagrid being like, they just need to be exercised. You go put a leash around them and take them for walks.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, like, you know, sentient cannon, blast-ended Scroot, potato.
Yeah. They do blast, after all.
Yeah, from their ends, just like a cannon.
A little bit of Harry's PTSD from the Scroot still. Like,
Seriously?
he's like, even months later, he's like, yeah, Hagrid, that was not cool.
Right. Like, we all talk about Harry's PTSD from the graveyard, but what about the PTSD from Hagrid's classes?
Oh, let's not talk about Hagrid. Moving on. I'm really sorry I brought him up.
Aureo, you're just going to be the Hagrid police. Like, every time Hagrid's brought up and I'm on an episode, you're like, no, abort, next topic.
We can talk about Hagrid when we disinvite Irvin.
But okay, talk of fantastic beasts and not Hagrid. I always found it really fun and interesting that Joe starts dropping the names of fantastic beasts here. Like, because when they wake up the next morning, they are going to spray the doxies, and there's a nest of dead puffskeins in the house. And she doesn't even bother to explain what the puffskeins are. And that is because she published the Fantastic Beasts book between Goblet of Fire and Order of the Phoenix, and it shows. And, like, I don't know about y'all, but I remember when I was reading it the first time, I, like, went out and got my Fantastic Beasts textbook and, like, kept it by my side as reference while I was reading Order of the Phoenix. No, just me.
That was just you?
I did have it. I think I sort of, because it was with all those silly comments and everything, I didn't treat it as seriously. It was like, oh, this is just, like, funny little thing she wrote for charity. It's not really important, so...
I kind of look at this as an interesting thing of just how well developed her world is at this point, and that like she could throw out a term that no one's ever heard, and you just like kind of assume it's some small magical creature, and can use your like imagination to think of like what that might be. If you hadn't read the Fantastic Beasts book, of course, but like I think it was cool that like at this point she could do stuff like that, and it wasn't like, you know, you have no idea what she's talking about. She can make stuff up without even explaining it. I just thought that was cool for how well the world has developed.
Yeah, you pick things up through context.
Right, exactly.
Or through reference books if you're a Ravenclaw like me. And, of course, we just got to give a shout-out to Mrs. Black's screeches echoing up through the house once more. Stains of dishonor! Filthy half-breeds, blood traitors, children of filth! And so, I'm just going to take this moment to tell you all about the favorite cosplay I've ever done, which is the portrait of Mrs. Black.
So you just insulted people?
Yes. It's so much fun.
So that was fun for you and slightly disturbing for everyone around you.
Oh, no, it was very disturbing for everyone around me because I always bring it out first thing in the morning, like on day 3 or 4 of a convention when everyone is properly hungover. Because I have a bit of a sadistic streak.
I know.
But yeah, no, so I bring the portrait of Mrs. Black to conventions where, like, I walk around, like, dressed as Mrs. Black with the picture frame, and I always bring her out first thing in the morning, so I, like, stroll into breakfast at 9 a.m. and just start screaming insults at the top of my lungs. What can I say? She's a crowd favorite.
Do they stun you to make you stop?
Oh, they try. They try. People try, like, closing the hangings. Like, they try casting spells at me. And then, people who know me really well, they just, like, will be walking down the corridor, see me, and just literally do a 180 turn without breaking stride and walk the other way.
Wow.
I love dressing up as Mrs. Black. It is getting harder with the years. Like, I lost my voice for, like, a day and a half the last time I did it.
So, listeners, if you go to a convention with Irvin that lasts multiple days, you know what to avoid on day 3 or 4.
Or what to line up for and enjoy.
Or that.
So I thought it was interesting that we get, like, another Lockhart name drop in this chapter. Like, you know, we've seen Lockhart a few different times, and, like, we just can't let him go, I guess, because Mrs. Weasley is still using the Gilderoy Lockhart Guide to Household Pests, and I just think this is, like, just, like, the funniest little drop.
Yeah, I really kind of liked this detail, because I think it shows that though Lockhart's a fraud, like, his book is actually still useful. And I think part of, like, you know, being a discerning reader is, like, not dismissing things, like, just because you may not like the source.
Yeah, you just have to read past the descriptions of his outfit as he was dealing with stuff and get to the actual instructive bits. Because, like, his tests in Hogwarts always seem to be like, what color of rope did I wear? I was like, well, that's useful.
Right. When spraying doxies, make sure you wear something that you can get black on without ruining the outfit.
I think that might actually be Mrs. Weasley's favorite part, is to read about, like, imagining whatever outfits Lockhart is wearing as he's doing these things. I think she keeps that book just so she can see, like, that cover photo of him looking magnificent and smiling at her.
Yes, because he may be a fraud, but his smile is 100% real.
Yeah.
And it's also another one of those J.K. Rowling, I'll mention a character that you may have forgotten about because he was 3 books ago, but he'll come up later in this book. So you get a little drop here, and then when we meet Lockhart later at St. Mungo's, you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember him.
Yeah. And when we meet Lockhart later, he's getting all of this fan mail, and I think that speaks to the fact that his reputation has continued. Like, we can see that with Mrs. Weasley, we can see that with the fan mail, like, whether everyone knows he's a fraud or not, I'm not sure, but his reputation has continued, even though he has been in St. Mungo's for the last few years.
I feel like Dumbledore was probably too preoccupied with the other events after Chamber of Secrets. So we know, like, that's where he first sees the diary, hears about the diary, and he's, like, now, like, kicked off on his, like, Horcrux quest. And so, like, I don't think his first priority was, like, let's actually discredit Gilderoy Lockhart. It was probably like, all right, Gilderoy, you go to St. Mungo's, you'll be fine there. And then it's just, like, out of sight, out of mind when he's more...
I think it was Minerva deal with this, and he was
Maybe.
I was actually going to say that it depends on what... The amount of fan mail depends on why you're a fan of Lockhart. You know, maybe the fan mail from people who admire his deeds has dried up, but the people who admire his looks more than his deeds, I mean, his looks haven't faded.
I think that's exactly true. I think that that's sort of the point I was trying to make, is that because of his good looks, his reputation has remained intact among some people because they still like getting signed photos from him, and they like looking at his photos in the books. So for some people, it doesn't really matter to them.
Yeah.
Okay, this has triggered a thought, and I don't think we'll have an answer, but we don't really understand how owl post works. Do you just tell your owl, go find Lockhart, I want an autograph? Or or do you have to know where he is? Because, you know, they could just be unaware that he is at St. Mungo's and the owl just finds him. But then I'm also like, why was Harry not inundated with owls by, you know, fans when he was a privet drive? But maybe Dumbledore added protections.
Yeah, I think that's it. Because I think Joe's written about Owl Post on Pottermore. And yeah, basically, like, you tell your owl, like, you know, who to get it to, and the owl will get it there. Like, the address sort of helps, but isn't strictly necessary. And yeah, I think just Dumbledore would have taken care to keep Harry, like, away from all the fan mail.
Yeah, would have been a bit weird when you're like 5 and your family tells you you're nothing and stop talking about weird wizard dreams, and you simultaneously get Owl Post being like, "Can I have a autograph?" I know we've talked about boggarts a little bit. I always thought it was a bit weird that, you know, whenever we have like a rattling cupboard or something, it's like, oh, surely this is a boggart. I know they go through the extra steps of we'll wait for Mad Eye and he'll take a look with his magical eye and we make sure it actually is a boggart. But like, couldn't it be so many other things? Like, why is that the number one conclusion with drawing?
Yeah, how do we know it's not a murderous school or something like that?
Yeah, especially in this house.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would think their first instinct would be that it was something more sinister.
Maybe they would expect, like, most other things to, like, emerge from wherever the boggart is rattling. And, like, the fact that they haven't seen it yet, like, narrows it down somewhat.
Or I wonder if it's, like, sort of, like, kind of like the Hominum Revelio spell that you can sort of do some sort of spell to see if there is, like, a living creature there. And since a boggart is not really, it's, I don't know exactly what it is, but some sort of spirit type creature, not quite, like, solid. That might be a way that they are guessing that it's not, like, an actual creature.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I'm sure they were able to, like, rule out, like, fantastic beasts and such, through the use of magic, like, leaving it to be something, you know, weird and spirit-like.
So another little funny thing that I picked out was the skiving snack boxes. I've always thought that this was, like, a little, like, the range of products is a little bit varying in how useful they would actually be. Like the nosebleed nougat and the puking pastilles, like, that makes sense to me. Like, hey, you have this thing happen to you, and you know, you could go out of the classroom and then eat the other half and it would stop. But, like, the fainting fancies to me just seem very non-usable, or whatever the word would be, non-useful, not that useful. And so I just, like, think, like, you know, what are your thoughts? Like, which ones, like, would you want to use? Which ones would you wouldn't want to use?
I mean, I wouldn't knock the fainting fancies quite yet. Because I think with the fainting fancy, you just need a friend to feed you the other half to get you to stop fainting. You know, so it's a skiving snack box for partners in crime. You know, like, I feed you one today, like, tomorrow you feed me one. I think it's kind of nice that they require 2 people to work.
I could just see, like, you being halfway to St. Mungo's before your friend could, like, slip you the other half, though.
Yeah, they're like, oh crap, which pocket is it in? Damn.
You'd also kind of want your friend to catch you as you fell, because, like, that would hurt. You didn't need to coordinate it well.
Depends on the effect you're going for. Like, personally, if I was doing fainting fantasies, I want to, like, collapse dramatically with a giant thud in the middle of the classroom.
Sure, but do you want a concussion or to break your arm or something like that?
Oh, I'm a wizard. It's fine. You can mend broken arms in a trice.
Concussions, though? I don't know.
I feel like Madame Pomfrey's got it.
They invented a sport with, like, 2 cannonballs trying to eject people from brooms, so surely they have something for concussions.
Hopefully.
I mean, I know we've all sort of said we would pick the fever fudge, but then also I'm like, is fever a thing that happens in the wizarding world? Because there's pepper up potion. It doesn't seem like it's a likely disease to have.
No, there is, because there's a bout of flu in one of the years.
It doesn't mean that is the same type of flu that we know.
Yeah, I mean, it might be something where you could get out of one class and they would tell you, like, go to Madame Pomfrey, she'll give you the pepper up potion, and then you'll be fine. You'll at least be able to get out of that one class.
Yeah. Also, I know that, like, all of us said we would take the fever fudge for our skiving snack box of choice, but mine comes with an asterisk, which is, if I'm feeling spiteful, then I will absolutely take the puking pastille and just projectile vomit over everything.
So, like, if you were in Umbridge's classroom, per se?
Yes. Yeah. Like, for example, right now, my HR at work and I are having a bit of a détente about sick days and PTO. So right now, I would definitely take the puking pastille, just come to the office and just upchuck all over her desk.
Nice visual.
But also, I have a flair for the dramatic, so.
Oh, no one's picked that up from your description of your cosplay. But like, speaking of Fred and George, I think it's a really sort of cool insight that we get their commentary when she starts going into her rage. And Fred and George are like, oh, you can't make her do that. You need to like steer her away from this. And like, it's quite cool to see that they're so aware. How to
Mrs. Weasley, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that too. And also, like, it's good strategy. Like, when Mrs. Weasley's yelling at Mundungus, and they're like, you gotta head her off. Like, once she builds up a full head of steam, that's it.
Yeah. It's just, and also like, they're like, oh, it's nice to see her, scream at someone else for a change. But then they're like, oh, but they're doing it wrong.
Mundungus, we have notes.
Yeah. Adam, I think you had a point here about Kreacher.
Yeah, I thought it was just like an interesting way that he addresses Fred when he says young master. And like, I think it might be partially clarified later in the chapter when Sirius is saying that the Kreacher's supposed to take orders from anyone in the family, and like all the purebloods are related, and that kind of like maybe explains it. But like, I just thought that was kind of like a plot hole. Like, why would he be referring to Kreacher or to Fred as like young master when he like shows contempt for the rest of them? Like Hermione calls Mudblood and like different things like that.
I mean, I read that as a very contemptful young master. I think Kreacher's showing plenty of contempt even with that title.
Yeah, and I think that there's a difference between what he says to someone's face versus what he mumbles underneath his breath. And like, to people's face, he might say something like young master, but then underneath his breath, he's going to be like blood traitor, mudblood, all of that. And also, I think the reason I don't think it's because of his family is because Sirius says that Kreacher doesn't take orders from Tonks. Probably because Andromeda was like off the tree, and the Weasleys are also not on the tree, as Sirius points out. So I think that Kreacher wouldn't necessarily take orders from the Weasleys. It's more like a fake. It's like fake politeness. Like, I think there is that contempt in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was raised in a house that, blood status was everything. So he would be more likely to feel okay to be rude to Hermione than he would be to someone who's still, a pure blood.
Yeah, like, I was given the impression that Kreacher was expected to obey, like, the people in the Order who are, like, staying at Grimmauld Place. And sort of that's what it's based on. Because, yeah, like, I can't see Kreacher considering the Weasleys family by any stretch of the imagination.
Do you think that's partially why Kreacher was able to give Bellatrix and Narcissa information on, like, the information he wasn't forbidden to tell? Like, if Bellatrix said, like, when he went to see her, when Bellatrix had asked, like, give me every bit of information you can give me that, you haven't already been forbidden to tell because she's in the family, like, that, because, like we had mentioned about Tonks not being part of the family tree anymore or blasted off, but Narcissa is definitely on there. Or, yeah, and Bellatrix.
I thought that, like, house elves were only magically compelled to obey their master. So, like, serious. And, like, whatever Kreacher told Bellatrix would just be volunteered. But it's a bit nebulous.
Well, isn't it because Sirius yelled out at him, so he's free to leave the house, and so he goes to the next best relatives? And that would then be Bellatrix, or Bellatrix and her sister, and that's how they managed to get information out of him.
Yeah, I think that Kreacher can do whatever he wants as long as he hasn't been ordered not to. So I think he intentionally wanted to go to Narcissa and Bellatrix and wanted to answer any questions that they had, regardless of whether they ordered him to or not. But I don't think he has just one master. Like I think in the let's say with the Malfoy family, I think Dobby, for example, would have to take orders from not just Lucius, but also Narcissa, also Draco. So I think it is a good question of, like, what is the realm of family? Like, what is considered a house elf's family? And are there sort of, like, more nebulous gray areas there? I don't know.
I thought they were bound to one person. That one person then tells them, you also need to take orders from and list of people. Because the house elves at Hogwarts are bound to Dumbledore, but I'm sure Dumbledore's like, you will also do whatever all the teachers say. And, overall serve Hogwarts. So when, students come into the kitchen, it's still in their best interest to help them because they think they're serving Hogwarts.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That it's like there's one main master or mistress who is the person who, like, can override anyone else's orders. So, like, nobody, like, let's say Draco orders Dobby to do something, but Lucius says, no, actually, Dobby, go do this instead. Like, Lucius can override it, but, like, Lucius tells Dobby, you also have to listen to Narcissa and you have to listen to Draco.
And when Harry becomes Kreacher's master, he's like, I'll send you to Hogwarts to work in the kitchen. But still, when Harry's like, oh, you are now going to shadow Malfoy,
right?
That overrides his now duties for the Hogwarts, house elf stuff. Because ultimately, Dumbledore isn't Kreacher's master, Harry is.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like when Snape takes over at Hogwarts that now Snape is, like, able to order Kreacher to spy on Harry or something.
No. I mean, by that time, Kreacher's back at the Blacks.
But then he goes back to Hogwarts, doesn't he? Or actually, we don't know exactly, but he's at Hogwarts in the Battle of Hogwarts, so
yeah,
I think he was at Hogwarts throughout that time after they leave Grimmauld Place in Deathly Hallows.
Yeah.
I kind of think I didn't know where I at least see the answer to this, but do we think Kreacher can hear them and, pretends to, not hear them and insult them? Or is he actually, so out of it that he doesn't think they can hear them? I mean, I would almost assume myself he does do it intentionally because we see his character change so much in Deathly Hallows. So I don't think he's insane or anything. But yeah, what do you guys think?
Yeah, I think he's intentionally saying these things under his breath with the knowledge that they can hear him. I think that it's sort of a small form of rebellion, and he thinks that if he acts crazy, he's less likely to get punished for saying these things. And there's a really interesting moment in this chapter where Hermione says, oh, he's not in his right mind. He doesn't know what he's saying. And Fred says, don't kid yourself, Hermione. He knows exactly what he's saying. And I think Fred is right here. And I think that Hermione is being actually a bit condescending towards Kreacher. She seems to be trying to create Kreacher into this sort of uncomplicated, like creating an uncomplicated narrative of him as a character, or I guess as a house elf, because it supports her sort of political agenda here. But I think that Kreacher is a lot more complicated than that, and it's sort of taking away his agency by saying that he isn't in his right mind. He's not saying this stuff intentionally. Like, he clearly is saying it intentionally. He's saying it as a rebellion. And I think it's in Deathly Hallows that she starts to realize that, and realizes that he's calling her mudblood and saying all these things because of his love for the members of the Black family who are kind to him, and that he's doing it to sort of support those members of the Black family and as a rebellion towards Sirius, who he doesn't respect at all.
Yeah, I think Hermione's being very naive here that, she thinks, oh, we can help this creature by being nice to him. And that will solve all of his problems. That'll end slavery. It won't. So, yeah.
I mean, I agree with that. And I think there's textual evidence that shows that Kreacher understands what he's saying, because we only really have one other, instance of someone being, their mind being addled in the same way, I guess you'd call it. We see Crouch Sr., when he comes out of the woods, he's, clearly doesn't know what he's saying at times and then does know what he's saying. But we can see how the author writes that scenario where someone may not be aware of what they're saying. And you can tell that Crouch is trying to speak a message, but then he goes off on tangents where it's clearly he has no idea that he's even speaking. He's talking about his son and about dinner with Mr. and Mrs. Fudge and wherever they're going. And so I think if we were led to believe as readers that we weren't supposed to know that, or that we were supposed to think that Kreacher doesn't know what he's saying, there would have been other things yes, madam, I'll clean the house, and oh yes, and I'll go get this ready for dinner, and I'll clean this, and there would have been other things intermixed that would lead us to think he didn't know. But everything, you're right, is very pointed, and everything is an insult. So I agree that he's very aware of what he's saying.
I mean, so I think he's aware of what he's saying. I'm not convinced he's not a little bit mad in terms of not realizing that Walburga Black is gone and all that, because he does sort of seem to consider the portrait of Mrs. Black to be his bestie. So I do think he's sort of gotten very unused to being around people at this point, because per the Black family tree, Walburga died in 1985. So at this point, Kreacher's been alone for a decade. So I definitely think he might be a little bit out of touch with reality and social norms by this point. But that said, I do agree that I think, the muttering is definitely on purpose to piss people off.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think he's definitely been affected by the fact that he's been alone so long. But it's actually interesting to think about, Sirius has also spent a lot of that time alone and with Dementors and stuff. So, they've both they kind of mirror each other in that way of just spending all of that time alone with their own thoughts or in these kind of negative places, and it's affected them in different ways. But yeah, it's interesting.
They should just go to group therapy.
Yes, Kreacher and Sirius.
Kreacher and Sirius together. Yes. Yeah. I think it would go really well.
Throw Lupin in there with them.
Yeah. But anyway, so after Kreacher goes off muttering, they break for lunch, and Sirius and Harry take a look at the Black family tapestry, the noble and most ancient house of Black. And there is so much to talk and think about here. I love the Black family tree and just all of the crazy stories there.
I always forget how shocked Harry is when, he finds out who Sirius is related to.
Yeah.
I think it's really telling, the fact that Sirius is blasted off and that whole backstory. But the thing I kind of found interesting about it is that he tells Harry that he went to James's to live. when he was 16 or so years old. And it just makes me like James Potter even more, like just thinking of him saying like, come on, buddy, like you'll be fine. You can come live with me and my parents. Like he probably didn't even ask his parents, just said like, yep, you're coming to my house. No, like don't worry about it.
I'm so like curious about this. Like, I actually think this is like the most compelling part of like Sirius's life story in terms of like me wanting to know more. Like, I want this story. Like, the whole process of Sirius at, like, 16 years old, like, getting the money from Uncle Alfred to run away, like, moving in with the Potters, like, and how someone as brash as Sirius was as a teenager, like, how he would act that way when, like, his friend's parents took him in. Like, it's fascinating. It's a cool parallel between Sirius and Harry. Like, they were both sort of taken in by their friend's parents after a shitty family situation.
And then James's parents, like, die, like, pretty... Like, I was going to say pretty young, but I think we're meant to believe they were sort of older. But die, like, before James does. And so Sirius has just gotten these new parents, and then they die, and then James dies. Isn't that terrible?
Yeah.
Yeah, he found his new family and then they're dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other commonality Sirius and Harry have is all their parental figures die.
Yeah.
Bleak.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I realized I did a little bit of math here with Bellatrix, when Bellatrix is introduced on the tapestry, and then when Harry meets her at the end. And this is not a perfect ring, but it's, like, fairly close. So it's 114 pages in for the tapestry, and then it's, like, 89 pages from the end. So, not that far off. And I think that's, like, a really interesting ring of being introduced to the fact that she's related to Sirius, but that Sirius doesn't consider her family. And then at the end, when Bellatrix, like, kills her cousin, I think makes it very powerful.
Yes.
I mean, depending on your edition, it may even be closer in pages.
Yeah, that's true. That's actually true.
Books come in different sizes.
Totally fair. So I think
is this going to be like a regular segment where like the Americans of the show are like, so on this page of the book and versus that page of the book, and Oreo's like, there are different page numbers, right?
Thank you for that. And
also, translations do exist.
Exactly. And there's hard copy and paperback. And yes, so I think it's intended to be a ring. It doesn't necessarily mean that the page numbers have to add up perfectly.
Yeah.
Yes. No, I agree. I think the way Joe built up Bellatrix is like masterful writing. Just like, because we hear so much about her, like her name is dropped again and again. So like by the time we meet her in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, it's this like, oh like we know to be afraid of her. I think I actually covered that in one of my series of essays about Death Eaters, like how Joe builds that introduction to Bellatrix, but it's masterfully done. Yeah.
And then something else that I thought was pretty cool, as Sirius is discussing like his family tree and Harry learns about Regulus, and Sirius kind of says like, he joined the Death Eaters, and then Harry right away says like, were your parents Death Eaters too? And like I just think it was interesting. And Sirius obviously says no, but like they thought Voldemort had the right idea or something like that. And it just shows that there's like layers to this, like Voldemort, to how much support Voldemort has in the wizarding community. Like it's not just like Death Eaters versus everyone. It's like more like Death Eaters versus like people who think Voldemort has the right idea versus like some people who might be indifferent, to like some people that are closely opposed and other people that are openly opposed. And like I thought that was like a good way to show that without coming right out and saying it. Yeah,
and I realized the different levels of that idea when reading Goblet of Fire in the Quidditch World Cup. I had, at first when I was reading it, I thought, the wizards who are participating in this Muggle torture are all Death Eaters. But then as I was reading it a little bit more closely, I noticed that that's not true. We have this quote that says, more wizards were joining the marching group, laughing and pointing up at the floating bodies. And then another one that says, the crowd beneath the Roberts family was larger than ever. They could see the ministry wizards trying to get through it to the hooded wizards in the center. So then I was like, oh, it's just the first people who start out doing this who are Death Eaters. And everyone else who's joining on them are just sort of normal wizards doing their everyday life who want to participate in torturing these muggles when the opportunity arises. So that just showed me how much muggle prejudice was just sort of running rampant throughout wizarding society, even among those people who don't consider themselves to be Death Eaters.
Yeah, I think this was a very important lesson for the books to impart, especially to a young and impressionable readership. Like, the fact that the world isn't split into good people and Death Eaters, which I think that quote is coming quite a few chapters after this one, but this is sort of like laying the foundation for that. I think it's really important for us to realize. Like, I mean, both in, like, terms of, you know, the Harry Potter books, you know, with good people and Death Eaters, and, like, in the real world, where, like, you know, lots of people are into a lot of really shitty things without being, like, actively supervillains.
Yeah, and I think it comes at the right time in the series, because, like, book 1 to 4, it's much more black and white. I think it opens up more in 4, as you said, Sophia, that we're seeing more, you know, shades of grey in the scale. But now that we know Harry is in this fight against the number one Death Eater and the leader of the Death Eaters, really, that he has this realization that, you know, there's still other terrible people out there that don't have to be Death Eaters. It doesn't make them nice people.
Mm-hmm. I think we also see that with the Snatchers a little bit. Like, some of them are associated with / familiar with the Death Eaters, but it sounds like there's whole groups of them that are just sort of like bad, but not Death Eater bad.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like the Snatchers are like Death Eater bad without the prestige. But I also admit to being 100% skewed on that, because Fenrir is with the Snatchers and he is just the worst.
Yeah, I think it's just Voldemort is too picky with who he's giving the mark, but he does realize he needs, you know, numbers.
Yes, he will only give the mark to promising 18-year-olds.
Yeah. Only those people.
I mean, I think that there are a lot of people who maybe are pureblood, so they're sort of very complacent about Voldemort. I think especially what Sirius says is, like, at the beginning, before Voldemort showed his true colors, where they're like, either they're sort of complacent of like, oh, well, this is not going to affect me in any negative way, or they're sort of pro his movement because they're saying, yes, we are the best. He should be trying to put us on top. So we can see like a pretty pervasive idea among a lot of purebloods that, oh, this isn't really something we have to worry about so much, or like, this is only going to help us. It's not going to harm us. I
just had like a work training, so these words are very much where I'm picking them up from. But it was about how you can shape behaviors by either action, inaction, or tolerance. And, you know, action would here be you join the Death Eaters and you do evil stuff. Inaction and tolerance here is like sort of similar-ish, as in you maybe don't, you know, you don't speak up against Voldemort, but you're like, yeah, it's all right. I think he has the right ideas, and you don't participate yourself, but you're still, you know, not standing up against him. So you still, by not, you know, joining the, you know, the opposite side, you're still giving him more power. Mm-hmm. I think one of the other things we see here while they're talking about the tapestry is that Sirius is already very unhappy and, you know, going into that sort of depressed state of mind. But he still isn't fully there. And he's, you know, like, Harry being there is probably helpful. And he's like, it's not great here, but I understand all of the logistical reasons of why this is where we should have the the headquarters. It is the place that makes the most sense. And, Harry's even able to relate to Sirius. And when he says that the Dursleys would even be much worse, Sirius is like, okay, they must be really terrible, because he thinks where he is the worst place. Even though he's been to Azkaban. It's like, he should really have some perspective.
Yeah. And so after we're done with the Black family tapestry, which, listeners, I know there's a lot to talk about in terms of, the Black family and all the names that are dropped. We are going to do a separate episode all about the Black family at some point in the coming months. So we're not skipping it. We're just postponing, I promise. But after they go through the tapestry, they continued the war on the house. So there's a lot of interesting stuff there, right? Obviously, we get the epic line about the heavy locket that none of them could open, which, snaps for Joe. Excellent foreshadowing. But right before the locket, I actually found an interesting line. There was a musical box that emitted a faintly sinister tinkling tune when wound, and they all found themselves becoming curiously weak and sleepy until Ginny had the sense to slam the lid shut. And I found it really interesting that Ginny was the one who responded to it. And I wonder if this is a hint that sort of Ginny is more on top of things when dark objects that manipulate your mind show up. That I think sort of after the diary episode, she has a heightened awareness of this type of mental manipulation. And she's like, nope, not here for it.
That's what I always thought as well. And I really like that.
Yeah, I agree.
And this also serves as a very quick and subtle way of introducing our new and improved Ginny, who is sensible and capable and is going to be absolutely everything to Harry and far more than Harry and Ron's kid sister.
Yeah. And going back to this idea of sort of this being a sort of a hinge point for Ginny's character, we also saw that moment earlier with Fred and George where they're saying, size is no guarantee of power. Look at Ginny. And Harry's like, what do you mean? And they're like, have you been on the receiving end of one of her bat bogey hexes? So this is also sort of a moment where Harry is being introduced to the idea that Ginny is much more powerful than he had ever sort of seen her as, and that she's a total badass.
Yeah, no, this is a turning point for a lot of things, and I love that it's also a turning point for Ginny because she's such an important character.
Yeah.
And, sorry, Adam, did you want to say anything about Dumbledore ignoring Harry?
Yeah, so I thought, as we close the chapter, obviously, the very last, little tidbit that we find out is that, Harry's hearing is coming up, and, Dumbledore essentially was there the night before, and was talking about the hearing and to the order and that stuff, and that he had no contact with Harry, and it just kind of makes Harry feel bad, obviously. And it's the start of kind of the next however many chapters remain in the book, another 30 chapters or so, of just Dumbledore completely ignoring Harry. And the reader, your first time through, you don't know why. And I just think it's infuriating. As a reader for Harry, I just hate it. So I definitely as the chapter ended, I was reminded that this is the turning point of that too, and the start of that aspect of the book that I really, really don't like.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a fan of Dumbledore ignoring Harry. What about you guys?
I still think we should have used the Arthur Weasley plan from Prisoner and give Harry some information, and it would have been much more useful.
Yep.
And as Sophia said earlier, saying, give him occlumency lessons from the get-go and not, once the damage is done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in retrospect, you look at it and say, does Voldemort really not know that Harry and Dumbledore have some type of relationship beyond that of student and pupil? So, I feel like Dumbledore should have been more involved with occlumency and being forthright with Harry and all that stuff at the beginning, and it would have saved probably the climax of this book from happening and Sirius's death.
Dumbledore was like, Minerva will deal with it. And she was like, what now?
And then when she said no, he was like, no, Snape can deal with it.
It's honestly, it's one of, I think, Dumbledore's worst strategic decisions. choosing to ignore Harry. That was, not one of his better ideas.
Nope.
And that's about it for the chapter discussion. So now we're introducing a new semi-regular segment for the podcast, which we're going to call The Pub's Jukebox. Essentially, what's playing here at the Three Broomsticks tonight? And this is where I tell you all about Wizard Rock songs that relate to whatever we discussed. So the song that this chapter brought to mind for me is Star-Crossed Brothers by Malfoy Manor. Malfoy Manor is a British wizard rocker who also goes by Split Seven Ways. And they did an album together with Nagini where they re-recorded the song as a duet. But basically, Star-Crossed Brothers, it's about Sirius and Regulus, like, arguing with each other, and it's so good. Like, because Malfoy Manor songs are always, like, full of a lot of feelings, and it's just about them, like, arguing about each other. Like, the chorus, which is fantastic, is Sirius going, "You think you're perfect, but you're just a brat." And Regulus goes, "You think you're a rebel, but you're not all that." And Sirius goes, "You do what you're told, and it's a bloody shame." To which Regulus replies, "You think you're cool, but you're so vain." And then they both go, "And I hate that you are part of me." And I just think it perfectly captures, like, the fraught relationship between Sirius and Regulus, and, like, even though they were brothers, like, how much they just didn't get along.
You're not all that. Do what you're told, it's a bloody shame. You think you're cool, but you're so vain. And I hate that you are part of me.
So yeah, give that song a listen.
We'll link to it in the show notes so you can find it.
Well, thank you, Adam, so much for visiting us at the Three Broomsticks today. So great to have your expertise, all of your 30 reads of the series on our side.
70 reads.
70 reads. Oh, sorry. Oh my God. 70. Okay. 70 reads of the series. I was underselling you. Is there anywhere that you would like to tell people to follow you, or any social medias or websites or anything?
No, I don't have a huge online presence or anything, but I am on the comment boards. I am Snitches Get Stitches. So if you ever see comments from me, that's my handle.
Nice.
Excellent. We will look out for lots of comments from you in the coming episodes then. Always a pleasure having you on. Thanks so much for joining.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure, and I can't wait to hopefully maybe do it again sometime.
And before we head out, listeners, we'd like to ask for your support to get this podcast up and running. If you can afford to throw a few galleons our way, please head over to patreon.com/3broomsticks. That's with the number 3, to sign up. We're offering bonus content, chats with the hosts, on-episode shout-outs, and all kinds of stuff to our patrons. There's a lot of administrative expenses, websites, hosting fees, all that kind of jazz, involved in keeping the lights on here at the Three Broomsticks. So we'd really appreciate your help in supporting this podcast so we can talk about Harry Potter for a long time to come. And also, if you like our show, please tell your friends. We're starting out, and word of mouth is a huge help to us. So we love to see it, tell your friends, tweet about it, Instagram, Facebook, smoke signals, like whatever. And also, please rate and review us on whatever platform you're listening to us on.
If you'd like to contact us, you can find us at 3broompod on Twitter. 3 is spelled out. At 3broomsticks podcast on Instagram, also spelled out 3. At 3broomstickspod on Facebook, 3 spelled out. Website is 3broomstickspod.com. 3 spelled out. And the links to the essays we mentioned will be in the show notes on our website. You can also submit a topic. You can let us know your thoughts. You can also email us at 3broomstickspod@gmail.com. This time, though, it's with the number 3.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's a mouthful.
We're all going to get this contact info memorized sooner rather than later.
We're just linking it everywhere, so hopefully you'll be able to find us. Next time we meet at the 3 Broomsticks, we'll be discussing threes, because it will be our 3rd episode. And it's going to be all about the 3 and trios that pop up in the Harry Potter series. So start counting your threes. I'm Aureo.
I'm Irvin.
And I'm Sophia. Thank you for listening. See you next time in the 3 Broomsticks.
Cheers!
Give me big old buckets of butterbeer. Give me big old barrels of butterbeer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butterbeer.
This episode of The 3 Broomsticks was edited by Patrick Musilek. The theme song was written and performed by the Faithful Sidekicks. Make sure to check them out at thefaithfulsidekicks.com.
Okay, so I think timing-wise, I need to sort of have us start winding down now, but I think we kind of have gone through most of our content, it looks like.
Yeah, I think sort of Ginny is kind of the last one we want to go into. So, I mean, we can either ask you for, 10 more minutes, or, you can depart early if you really need to.
I could do 10 more minutes, but it would have to, legitimately be 10 more minutes.
Okay, I mean, just
go. Yeah. Okay.
No, go when you need to.
Okay. Okay.
We're not holding anyone hostage.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, only with our scintillating conversation.
Yes. Irvin has a sadistic streak, so we don't know what to expect. All right.
You're much closer to him physically than I am.
I know. So I'm always a little concerned.
Yeah, she's seeing me tomorrow for a dance lesson, so.
Hold me hostage tomorrow. Okay, so